Over 30 years, he waited for death, a cold-blooded killer who took 2 innocent lives and whose final curse was aimed directly at the state's governor. Donald David Dilberk is more than just a name on a death row inmate file. He's a deep scar in the justice system, the embodiment of a lifelong rage. In this video, we'll trace the path of Dilberk's last meal, uncover the gruesome details of the crime spree that rocked the state of Florida, and finally, confront the question that still haunts many: can a shattered childhood ever excuse 2 lost lives? After 3 decades on Florida's death row, Donald Dilberk will be executed by lethal injection at any moment. Dilberk has been on death row since his 1990 murder conviction. The victim was Robbie Faye Vann, brutally slain in the Tallahassee Mall parking lot. Reporter Katie Kaplan is on location outside the prison where the condemned man's final moments are about to unfold. It took over 30 years for Donald Dilberk to face his judgment. A jury convicted him by an 8-4 vote. His image when arrested, wearing an orange jumpsuit, leaning against a pillar, sunglasses on, a chillingly defiant look. After the deadly attack, he was chased by a security guard whom he also tried to stab before being apprehended shortly after. In court, Dilberk confessed to his crime, stating that he stabbed Faye Vann when she began to resist. "She screamed, then I rushed to get my hair out of her hand and she bit me," he testified. Hoping his confession would help avoid the death penalty, Dilberk was ultimately convicted. The public once mistakenly believed he would be imprisoned permanently because prior to that, at just 15 years old, Dilberk had shot and killed a deputy sheriff with the officer's own gun, a cold-blooded murderer. The judge then sentenced him to life in prison without parole. The case seemed closed, but the justice system failed miserably. Just 4 years later, Dilberk escaped from prison. He was caught. Then, a few years after that, he escaped again. This time, the consequence was bloodshed. June 24, 1990, a sweltering afternoon in Tallahassee. In the crowded mall parking lot, Robbie Faye Vann, 44, was sitting in her car doing her own thing. She had no idea that Dilberk, who had escaped from a correctional facility, was lurking, looking for a way out, and had stolen a knife. He tried to carjack Faye Vann. She resisted fiercely, and he stabbed her repeatedly until she collapsed, bleeding out in the driver's seat. The car lurched forward, crashing into a tree. She died at the scene. He fled. Within hours, police tracked him down, arresting him in the backyard of a house, the murder weapon still in his hand. Outrage erupted across the state of Florida. How could a cop killer sentenced to life in prison be free, causing further heinous crime? The Florida Department of Corrections faced furious criticism, not just for this horrific murder, but for a complete systemic failure, a failure in assessment and public protection in keeping dangerous criminals behind bars. For years, Dilberk remained silent on death row until 2023. When his name reappeared in the news, the execution warrant was signed. His final hours began. But when he spoke, for the last time, what emerged was not remorse, but a furious rage. A fierce attack aimed directly at Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. A final act of defiance from a man who had spent his life resisting authority. Was he a damaged child who never had a real chance at life? Or was he a dangerous manipulator, weaponizing his pain? This is the story of Donald David Dilberk, his crimes, his escapes, his victims, and his final day that Florida will never forget. In 1979, on a warm spring night, Dilberk, then 15, sat alone in a stolen Cadillac parked near Fort Myers Beach, Florida. The engine was off, the park was closed, but the boy didn't leave. Gaunt, with deep set eyes, dirty from days of wandering, homeless, with no one waiting for him, only a gun hidden under the seat, and a simmering rage after years of societal neglect. A call reported a suspicious vehicle. Deputy Sheriff Dwight Lynn Hall, 31, arrived to investigate. As he approached the car window, Dilberk fled. A chase in the night. They were strangers, but in mere seconds, their fates became forever intertwined. The two struggled. Dilberk gained control of Hall's gun, fired 2 shots, killing the officer. The teenage boy was arrested shortly after, charged with high-degree murder. The state of Florida could have sought the death penalty, but the court decided life in prison without parole. But the prison couldn't hold Dilberk. 4 years later, he escaped for the first time, was caught, and only had 1 year added to his sentence. Then he was transferred to a lower security facility, and by 1990, he escaped again. This time, the consequence was a woman's death. Dilberk traveled to Tallahassee, stole a paring knife from a store. 2 days later, he saw a woman sitting in her car. Robbie Faye Vann, 44, a gentle woman, completely unsuspecting. He opened the door, tried to carjack her. She resisted. He stabbed her 10, 15 times. The car crashed into a tree. She died instantly in the driver's seat. Police caught him shortly after, covered in blood, holding the knife. Years later, Dilberk lay in silent confinement on death row in Rayford, Florida. No longer a teenager, he was older, his face less fierce, but still unpredictable. The guards all knew one thing: he didn't fear death, only feared rotting away in prison. In early 2023, Governor Ron DeSantis signed the execution warrant. After decades of appeals, Dilberk's time was up. The execution date was set, February 23, 2023. Florida prepared to execute its first death row inmate in nearly 4 years. He had 30 days left to live. On the morning of February 23, bright golden sunlight shone down on Florida State Prison, piercing through the mist like a warning. In the execution chamber, time crawled agonizingly slowly. Every second was counted. Every breath was monitored. Dilberk had been moved to a special cell just 4 meters from the execution chamber. The room was colder, quieter, no cellmates, no sounds, only a steel bed, a sink, and a window looking out onto a hallway he would never walk through. He didn't cry, didn't ask for a priest, only requested quiet. Wrote letters to his family, to reporters. No pleas for mercy, no prayers, just writing to find some peace for himself. His last meal: fried shrimp, mushrooms, onion rings, pecan praline ice cream, pecan pie, and a large chocolate milkshake. A childlike meal, something innocent about it, as if trying to grasp a painless memory. That afternoon, the prison went into complete lockdown. At 5:00 p.m., he changed into a clean uniform, no handcuffs. 2 guards escorted him slowly to the execution chamber. He didn't look back. At 6:00 p.m., witnesses were seated behind the thick glass. On one side, the family of victim Robbie Faye Vann. On the other, reporters. The lights were bright. The room was cold. On the stainless steel gurney, ready, he was strapped down, arms extended, needles inserted into his veins. At 6:06 p.m., he turned his head towards the audience. And then something unexpected happened. I know I hurt people when I was young. I was wrong, but I know Ron DeSantis is worse. He's taken so much from so many people. I represent all the men, women, and children. He's got his foot on our necks. Ron DeSantis and people like him can suck our. The room was silent. Donald David Dilberk died at 6:13 p.m. on February 23rd, 2023. No tears, no pleas, just a direct insult to power, then eternal silence. But his death was not the end of a simple story. It was a wake-up call for a system that once believed it could rehabilitate twisted souls with concrete walls and cold steel doors. He was an abandoned child, true, but he was also the one who chose to shed blood twice. 2 lives, 2 families shattered forever. Deputy Dwight Hall, a husband, a father who never came home. Robbie Faye Vann, a woman on her way to the supermarket who never got to live another day. 2 families, 2 irreparable losses. Years behind bars, no apology could ever erase the blood shed. No appeal could soothe the pain of those who survive. He may have wanted his last words to resonate as a statement, but when the poison stopped his heart, all that was left was an empty silence. He disappeared just as he had lived, violently lost and ultimately swallowed by the darkness he himself created. Only the fluorescent lights remain, the silence, and a cold gurney awaiting the end of a vicious cycle that began decades ago. Donald Dilberk may have wanted his last words to be a statement, but when the drug stopped his heart, those words vanished. He disappeared. Just another number, another name in the file. And that was it. Donald David Dilberk's case wasn't just a personal tragedy. It reflected immense public outrage and relentless media scrutiny, especially after his second murder. When news of Robbie Faye Vann's brutal death spread, a furious wave of indignation swept through Florida. People couldn't comprehend how a killer who had already slain a deputy sheriff could be at large, committing another heinous crime. Spontaneous protests erupted, demanding answers and proper justice. But then Immense public pressure bore down on the Florida Department of Corrections, which faced harsh criticism for its negligence and irresponsibility in managing Dilberk. Haunting questions about systemic weaknesses and why such a dangerous individual was transferred to a lower security prison were relentlessly posed across all platforms, from local newspapers to national television channels. The media made Dilberk's case a focal point, and every gruesome detail from Dilberk's cold confession about how he stabbed Faye Van to the image of him being arrested with the bloody knife was thoroughly exploited. Sensational headlines constantly updated, painting Dilberk as a monster, a cold-blooded killer in the public eye. When the execution warrant was signed in 2023, media attention once again exploded, closely following his final hours. Notably, Dilberk's final curse aimed at Governor Ron DeSantis became a shocking headline, sparking intense debate about the line between remorse and defiance from a condemned inmate. This event not only closed a dark chapter in Florida's judicial history, but also left a profound mark on the power of public opinion and the media's role in shaping community perception of crime and justice.